Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. With big roster mania questions continuing to develop, Shotzzy has given his perspective on that potentially incredibly scary duo that Cloud9 are looking to form. Scrappy and HyDra potentially coming together for next season, potentially going to challenge OpTic and FaZe for many of these championships. Shotzzy says, yeah, if that happens, that is quite the duo, and potentially a duo that OpTic and FaZe might need to consider stopping from happening at all. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Here's Scump, by the way, on Scud, I think it's called, with the 74U in hand, or the Jackal or whatever, and just absolutely frying with it, I'm not gonna lie. Scump and many of these guys, if they wanted to come back, it would be absolutely possible to do so, but you know how it is. They have had their time, and obviously Scump's enjoying his retirement right now, although the possibility would be there. I mean, look, if Scump says he wants to come back, he'll be able to get a spot somewhere, but, you know, the ship has sailed on that one, and understandably so. Couple of Lion Man cards as well. Felony was officially released. Well, not released, actually. He's been dropped by Ravens to the bench as a restricted free agent. So they want a buyout for Fellow. I don't know if they're going to get one, to be honest, and I think it's difficult for Felony, right? Because, you know, he might get a spot. If he's unrestricted, somebody might say, you know what, Fellow, you were pretty decent on LAN this season. The numbers were okay. It's not great. It's kind of the season that you'd have probably expected from Felony overall, to be fair, after he came into the team. He was better on LAN, for sure, and there's probably some teams that say, you know what, Felony, very experienced player, solid performer on LAN, we could bring him into our roster for sure. But if there's a buyout involved, lots of these teams, especially at the bottom end of the league, will be like, why would we bother with that? We'll just get somebody that we can get for free. So I think that's the challenge here for Felony, and even Flames isn't a million miles away from those type of conversations, but I will say the disparity here is probably the biggest that I've seen so far, right? I mean, he came into that Gorillas team online, popped a couple of like 1v3s or whatever it was on that Invasion Search and Destroy, and was killing it. And then on LAN, never really performed. Obviously, people are going to say, oh, sound EQ or something like that. I don't know what the truth is there. But I just don't think that overall Flames, you know, performed well enough to be really considered. And it's kind of tough because Gorillas, of course, in the end, didn't even go to the World Cup. They just decided not to because they're going to end it all effectively with their organization. But fortunately for the other guys, Estriel and DiamondCon were able to join G2, and Fame was able to join Vegas Legion, right, to go to that event, so they at least got to play it. Flames didn't, and therefore didn't get a chance to kind of show up again on LAN and, you know, improve some of these numbers, but unfortunately that was not what happened. This is pretty funny as well. I thought this guy Drafty is basically calling out Exceed, because Exceed says, you know, pro COD player for FaZe in his bio, which is, you know, fair enough. I mean, I guess he's getting paid to play for FaZe Black, so it is what it is. But Drafty says, if you're going to have pro player on your bio, at least be on a pro team. You know, get out of my mentions, he says. So, I don't know, just thought that was pretty funny. Obviously, these guys certainly Exceed, are we hoping to get a spot in the league next season, but that seems more unlikely than ever, especially as even he mentions with the Vegas Falcons becoming a thing. This was interesting as well, especially as we're going to discuss Rostermania here in a second, from Kismet, right? Because we talked earlier today about the possibility of Cloud9 looking at Envoy, looking at other options, which presumably would be in the place of Kismet. And as Kiz says, a lion doesn't concern itself with the opinion of sheep. 100 emoji. So, you know, goes pretty hard, or is this quote, not gonna lie. The funny thing about this was that in the replies to Kiz, this guy Microwave Lover Zero says, you costed your team all year, every file 0 walking point 7. So Kismet then replies and says, my bad, and drops the picture of his MVP trophy from last year and his World Championship ring with the middle finger, which is, you know, fair enough, goes hard, clown this guy, no problem at all. I mean, you know, Microwave Lover, here he is with the desert mouse profile picture, whatever. So, you know, it is what it is. But also, it's literally a couple of seconds after he tweeted about the fact that the lion doesn't care of the opinion of the sheep, or in this case, the desert mouse, but then he's immediately getting, like, tight about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you can't say this and then immediately afterwards clearly actually do care about the opinions, because, you know, then you're replying with this. So I don't know. I thought it was just kind of funny, to be fair, overall. There was also this Stanley getting absolutely cooked here. He's in a lobby in the beta here on Skyline, and there's some CDL fans in the lobby that obviously recognize it being Stanley, and well, they bring him in for effectively what would be an assassination, but they hold him hostage, and then they just, you know, clown on him for a little while before eventually he gets let go. Well, he obviously dies, right, because that's what happens after a certain amount of time. So Dashy all found this rather entertaining, and I think for good reason as well. But let's talk about this whole roster situation as it stands, because yesterday, of course, we discussed Scrappy and the situation over there with Toronto and where that might potentially trend over the coming days. And this is Shotzzy's point of view on the situation, right? Because as it stands, the most likely possibility seems to be that Scrappy, you know, leaves Toronto. I would say it's still kind of 50-50, but it's definitely in the conversation being had right now. Scrappy said it himself, right? That he will be, you know, it's impossible basically for that team of 4 to stay the same on Ultra, and it looks like I might be playing somewhere else. So let's give it a 50% chance right now for Scrap to be leaving Toronto. And if he does leave, then Cloud9 are the most likely team because they've literally just dropped Simp to the bench. So, and there's even the possibility as well of them making some sort of trade. I mean, it's not going to be a trade with zero money attached. I mean, they're not just going to trade Simp for Scrappy. But it's possible that Toronto say, okay, if you want to pay us several, you know, couple of $100,000, we'll give you Scrap and we'll take Simp back off you. That might be an acceptable trade from both sides. And obviously, because they're making a change in that role, that makes Cloud9 the most likely candidate to pick up Scrappy and, of course, team up with HyDra, which is a pretty scary prospect for the league. This is one of the best things I thought about the league this season, is that we had effectively, Shotzzy on OpTic was their best player and was probably the 4th best player overall in the world this year. But, you know, Dashy was maybe the 5th best, right? And of course, over the entire season, OpTic were the best team. They won the World Championship. Simp was MVP in the end, but, you know, he was the best player from FaZe. HyDra was the best player on New York. They're now going to be Cloud9, and he was like the 2nd best, maybe 1st best, maybe 3rd best, depending on a respective player in the world. And Scrappy was that for Toronto, right? So the top 4 teams, the big 4 teams, all had a big player who was an MVP candidate effectively of the season, right? In Simp, HyDra, Scrappy, and Shotzzy respectively. So with that said, putting any of those 2 guys together on the same team would be a very scary prospect on paper, right? This season, we were kind of lucky on some level to have those 4 players spread over 4 teams. Next year, if Scrap and HyDra are together, you know, you can argue, based on recent performance, that is the best AR SMG duo combo in the entire game. I mean, I think it's difficult to argue against that, actually, certainly on this season's performance. You never really know how they're going to work together, and of course, the rest of the team around them also is important. But a Scrap HyDra duo is a seriously scary duo. So this is what Shotzzy says, and he's like, yeah, last year Toronto did a similar thing. They were looking for buyouts. It never happened in the end, but this year it looks like it is going to happen, and if that duo does form of Scrap and HyDra, that is a seriously good duo that will strike fear into the hearts of many of their opposition players. Scrap also absolutely zooted, it seems, out of his mind, talking about some of the possibilities for him. We say Cloud9, we even say maybe OpTic and FaZe, we'll discuss more in a second, but apparently if he wants to, he can just go to Minnesota. They've basically told him G2 apparently, maybe he's just joking around, but it would make some sense, right? That if, like, look, Scrap, please come to G2, come to Minnesota Rocker, and we'll treat you like a king, and you can choose whatever you want of the team. And Scrap's like, are we serious, guys? Of course, if Scrappy goes anywhere, it's going to be to a serious threat and a serious force in the league. And as Shotzzy says, definitely thinks Scrap and Paco will be great. I mean, he even did say will, like, kind of, you know, assuming that they may well be actually doing this. That's just the question, really, for you guys and for the other teams as to whether, you know, you allow this to happen on some level. We talked about it a bit yesterday, but my perspective is, if you're OpTic, you've just won champs. If Scrap and HyDra want to form a team on Cloud9, you know, I think you probably just let them go do it. The concern, I guess, is what sort of contract Scrappy signs, because I'm sure that OpTic have thought about, especially because of Scrap's relationship with those OpTic guys, he's pretty close with them. OpTic Scrappy, I think it will be a thing. I think OpTic Scrappy will be a thing at some point. And if you're OpTic, you're probably thinking, well, you know, how much time do we have to make this happen, right? Do we want it to happen next year or the year after, or what sort of contract is he going to sign with Cloud9? Because if he signs with Cloud9 like a 2+1, then it makes things pretty complicated. I imagine that Scrap would be smart enough to not sign a massively longer term deal if he does go and join Cloud9 in this instance. And I feel like it's something that's, you know, okay for OpTic to let happen. But obviously if next year doesn't go so well as this year, then you're thinking, well, can we get Scrappy? Oh no, he's tied down to Cloud9, and that's the concern. But also with Cloud9, as I said earlier today, I don't know if they're going to have unlimited resources, because, you know, in an ideal world, you bring in Scrap and Paco, you probably upgrade Skyz, which is difficult, but it's possible maybe, and then you look to upgrade Kiz with a guy like Envoy. But if you've spent all your budget buying out Scrap from Toronto, then you can't necessarily do that. If you're OpTic, I think the scary one is Scrap to FaZe. I mean, FaZe is already good enough with Drazah, but if there's any way that FaZe could possibly get any better than they currently are with their roster of 4, it's probably Scrappy into that team instead of Drazah. Like, as good as I think Drazah is, Scrappy is a little bit of a step up, maybe a significant step up, depending on your perspective. How good do you think Scrap and Drazah are respectively? That is the one that if you're OpTic, I don't think you can allow that to happen. Like, I'm not gonna lie, if there are rumours that Scrappy to FaZe is a possibility and FaZe are considering doing that, I don't think they would after their World Cup results. If they didn't win the World Cup, they would be though. I'm pretty sure about that. And even now, they might be thinking about it. If OpTic hear that that's going down, I don't think you can let that happen. I think like Shotzzy can sit there and say, okay, Scrap and HyDra on that Cloud9 team, you know, we can compete with that. But if FaZe are trying to make a move like that, especially after winning the World Cup, it's difficult for OpTic to say, well, we're fine, you know, even though they won the World Championship. Like, things have happened like that before. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Formal was actually playing the Black Ops 6 beta as well. I don't really know how much of a good time or not he had on this game. Of course, there's been talk about where he could go, but the reality is that with the way things are looking right now on the top teams and also Thieves coming into play, it doesn't really seem like that's going to be a possibility anymore. And of course, you know, understandably so, right? Some interesting numbers just to close out the video here from Brian Stats. Most 1.1 or greater KD events in the history of the CDL. The record here goes to Cellium by quite some margin with 26. No real surprise. But then you've got 3 players all tied on 17. Skyz is 1, Dashy is another, and then of course Octane, who is now retired and not played for the last season. Then you've get to some of the SMGs, Simp and HyDra. The fact that HyDra's already here, I mean, you know, he's not been around in the grand scheme of things that long. I mean, okay, he came in during Cold War, but Cold War wasn't even like a fantastic season as his rookie year, right? The fact that he's already up there with Simp is very impressive. Ahead of Attach, Awakening, aBeZy, Scraps up at 9 already. Zinni's at 9, of course, now retired. And then you get the likes of Pred and Slasher, and then it goes down to even Formal tied with Mac. Pretty interesting that Mac had, you know, 5 events at that KD or above. I imagine a fair few of those potentially could have been back at MW19 when he was really good. Even Wuskin making an appearance here as well. Pretty cool to see that little throwback. So interesting numbers. Doesn't really paint the entire picture of how good all of these players were, but as you might expect, the better players will be at the top of some sort of a list like this, because also it kind of considers longevity as well. The better players, they tend to stay around a little bit longer. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. This is just Scump's class, by the way, if you guys are interested, what he's put together here on the Jackal. So I'll leave this link down below if you guys want to check it out, or just go on his Twitter and you can find this exactly here. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you guys need a Jackal class, look no further. I've got the one for you in the early access beta. Let's get into it. We've got the Compensator, long barrel for the barrel, extended mag 2, CQB grip, and the balanced stock. Pistol, whatever you want. Concussion grenade, Semtex grenade, assault pack in case you need bullets. Then we go down here, put on Perk Greed, Ghost Dex, Double Time, and Gung Ho. And the specialty is the Enforcer. Have fun out there, folks.